Sorry for the delay. Happy Monday. We've got a game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final. Russ is in Tampa, but we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ. Russ, go ahead. Uh-oh.
Russ.
he's got the,
he's a hologram. Yeah.
He's got to look like he's being interrogated.
He does. That's pretty funny.
Well, hey, Russ, we got you now. You're
okay. Now would be a little delay. And as many people on.
We're losing Russ.
Okay. So let's talk about the Baltimore Orioles because I sat next to somebody on a flight.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, you're freezing up, Russ. Log off and log back in. Russ, log off and log back in. Okay, there you go.
Let me. I'll start us out.
Yes.
I was just going to talk about, as everyone knows, I live in the Detroit area and I'm a big baseball fan. And, some of my friends who are all about wins and losses give me a lot of grief because I can find enjoyment in watching any game. I want my teams to win, but even if they don't, I watch the games. I find things I'm interested in. And I was really fascinated by Riley Green's arrival at the major league level. And, I've seen a lot of players in hockey come up with great anticipation like Riley Green. But I've never seen one quite like this. In his first game, it seemed like even the veterans, because this team has really gone poorly, and they've got one of the best young studs in Spencer Torkelson.
Go ahead, Kev.
Kevin, you hear us?
Yeah, you there? Okay.
You were there.
Go ahead.
Spencer Torkelson. No, now I can't say his name. Okay. But anyway, he was already there, and the team is going bad. But I've never seen veterans get so excited about a young player coming up. In his first at bat, he got a blue pit, and everybody essentially rose up out of the dugout and just went crazy over that. Yeah, it was just a very huge thing. And I think sometimes hype can be very bad, but I think sometimes hype can be very good. In his case, I think this is kind of the lift. Because he came to town, this is another thing too. When they interviewed him, they talk about what he might be able to do, and he said basically, "I got no idea whether I'm going to hit or I'm not going to hit." But he says, "I can tell you one thing: we're going to win." And that's just exactly what he said. And I think that's why the veterans, sort of felt the way they did. And I thought, there's just something about bravado that can help a team, and not just in baseball but in hockey as well. And I think Riley Green has that. Even if he doesn't hit, but I think he will. But if he doesn't hit, I still think there's something about him that veterans like.
He represents hope. And by the way, Kev, I'm getting this Apocalypse Now Martin Sheen feeling from the ceiling fan. But Russ, what were you saying about the Orioles?
Yeah, so looks like the Angelos family might be trying to move the Orioles to Tennessee. And I don't know if that means Nashville proper or exactly where.
Oh, damn. Well, if that happened, that's a storied franchise, Kev. They moved the St. Louis Browns to Baltimore. I think it was in '46. So that's been there. That's been there for over 70 years. So I'm sure Major League Baseball will have something to say about that. But I don't know.
The Nationals won't be upset because they lost their lawsuit against.
I'd be shocked if Baltimore goes anywhere. That is a storied franchise in the American League. Look, we all know Angelos is a horrific owner. We all know he is not well respected in the league at all. There's been tons of issues. I'm sure the league would love to get rid of him. I really thought when they drafted Adley Rutschman and added some other guys that maybe they were going to be on the upswing.
Right.
Unfortunately, that has proven not to be the case so far in terms of what's happened with that organization.
They're better this year.
They're better. Well, that's a relative term.
But they were 62 Mets bad last year. So
the only thing is the usual things are going on in a place where sometimes the team moves, and that's not good attendance. The city seems to be getting a little more rundown. And those two things spell not much money at the box office, and that's what usually gets owners itchy to move.
Well, I've never been to Camden Yards. I'd love to go to Camden Yards.
It's great. It's nice, but it's look, you have to drive in that area. There are some areas that are not great around. You've got to park right in there, walk close, and it's all fine. But again, it just seems like Camden Yards maybe is losing its luster with the locals, and that could be a problem.
Well, I know that feeling, Russ. Every time I go into the Bronx for a Yankee game, if you go the wrong way down Jerome Avenue, you're taking.
Wait, hold on, Mike. It's been that way forever. I went to college in Washington Heights, and we used to take gypsy cabs back then for like $4 to go to the stadium to go see Bo Jackson and everybody. And back then, it was way worse than it is now. So Yankee Stadium has been the same in the Bronx for 35, 40, ever since it's probably open in many years ago, and especially the last 40 plus years.
Well, okay.
I'm old enough to have gone through the Detroit riots in 1967, and we went to ball games, at that summer. So,
Well, that was a championship team. No wonder. I mean,
yeah. Well, it wasn't that year, but
you could say the same about the Devils in Newark, right? I mean, it's the same difference, right? You go the wrong way in Newark, and you don't want to be around the arena. And I was at.
But when people stop going to games, that's the problem.
Yeah, but let me.
That's because the product on the ice hasn't met, right? When they were winning, people were showing up. Now nobody shows up even to Ranger Devils games.
But let me bring it back around to hockey, just from the Orioles thing. We complain about Bettman because he's waited way too long for what's going on in Arizona. But you want a commissioner that stands on, trying to keep franchises. Like, the only time that he's really been willing to move is when he feels like there's zero hope.
Just one other baseball thing, and then we'll get started here. I find it curious, and obviously I cover the Leafs, so a lot of Toronto fans follow me on Twitter. But I'm a Yankee fan, and the Yankees played in Toronto this weekend, and they beat Toronto decisively the first two games. And I didn't say anything. I didn't make a peep because I was being respectful of the other fan base. The Yankees were leading Game 3, 8-3, and I think the sixth inning. It ended up being a 10-9 Yankees loss. And you would think, from the Toronto fans that I heard, that Toronto had just won Game 7 of the World Series because they beat the Yankees. They avoided a sweep. I don't know what it is, and it's not exclusive to Toronto, but I don't know what it is about fans in certain fan bases where they've been beaten to a pulp the first two games, and because they came back from 5 runs down, they were crowing about the fact that they won. Honestly, I would say, okay, we salvaged something, but not like, oh my God, beating your chest.
Because if they swept them the series again after what they've done the last 30 or so games, they'd have absolutely no shot at coming back. And granted, I'm not sure if Toronto does, but if that's a 2-game swing right there by them coming back and winning, which could have an impact down the road. Not saying that it will, but it's a lot better than if they got swept completely. Mike, they have to, again, it's a salvage, but they're going to crow, especially since the viewpoint was the Yankees were unbeatable and the bullpen was basically unbeatable.
Okay, Eck, you got here just in time for the intro.
All right, that sounds good to me. Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, June 20th, 2022.
I'm Michael Agello.
Hockey World.
I'm Jan Levine. I'm impressed that Eck got the date right without having to look.
I looked.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
Russ Frozen.
That's Russ Frozen in Tampa. Hey, Russ.
Let it go. Let it go.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching Hockey Buzzcast. I forgot who I was. I'm Eklund. You're watching Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And let's start with where we are in the Stanley Cup Finals. And then I might have a little bit of breaking news on the Calgary Flames free agent front. So we'll get to that in a second. I just got off the phone. But yeah, Game 2, crazy. I'm watching down the beach this weekend, and it was fun. I set up a little beach thing on the beach, and I projector on the beach, and we're all going to watch this like really closely fought battle. And it was over before you could blink, and here we are. I mean, 7-0. Russ, you said this could be a blowout at some point, but I didn't think we'd see a game like that.
No, I mean 7-0's a little extreme, but I think Tampa is running the risk now of, if Cooper throws out that same lineup, of similar things happening. I think, you can cut away a goal or two at home, sure, and maybe is a little tighter, but I don't know. Colorado could go up 3-0 here, and it wouldn't shock me. But most of the hockey world's like, well, it's a 7-0 win. Colorado's not going to, the bounce back theory for Tampa, and they're champions. So I've heard all of that.
Yeah. Well, I wrote my whole story earlier this year about, the record of teams when they win when they win in the playoffs. If they lose by 5 or more goals is remarkable. Then the comeback. There is a bounce back playoff thing.
Well, okay, Kev, I have immense respect for Tampa Bay. They've got championship pedigree. They've been, especially in this playoffs, they've come back when when people started to write them off after they lost 2 games against the Rangers, after they lost 5-0 to Toronto. This feels different. I'm not ready to say I'm writing them off because I know better, but the domination that Colorado had in that game makes me start to think, okay, this is a different thing.
Yeah, I said the same thing this morning to someone about how, this domination that we're seeing from Colorado, I think just feels special to me too. Like they just look so good, and they're doing it against a very good team.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's even more remarkable. So as Russ said, he wouldn't be shocked if it's 3-0. I wouldn't either. I mean, Colorado is just playing really, really well. And, Cooper said after game 1, well, the best team won. Well, that was certainly true in game 2 as well. And, I don't think they being the Avalanche are going to be bothered by playing in Tampa. They just feel so good about the way they're playing and the confidence level. And they've got all the makings of a momentum team, but they're also a talented team as well. Yeah. So the one thing I did want to talk about, because I saw this morning and I was really kind of surprised by it, where someone said that he felt that the legacy of the Tampa Bay Lightning would be tarnished if they just get hammered.
Yeah, I saw that. I thought it was so many levels of bullshit, because it's like, okay, because they won in the bubble, because come on.
I had some Ranger fans who, when I wrote my stuff, was kind of using that as an excuse. And my view is, I don't care where you won it, you won back-to-back Stanley Cups. I mean, the excuse of being in a bubble and everything else is a ridiculous and flimsy excuse at best.
Jan, do you think Toronto Maple Leaf fans would be complaining if they won a Stanley Cup for the first time in 53 years because they won it in a bubble? No.
If your name goes on the cup, I don't think you care where you win it, as long as you've won it. I mean, the interesting part. So I was listening to Elliot Friedman and Jeff Marek yesterday. So the interesting thing that they spoke about is what Colorado forces you to do is make immediately snap quick decisions. They're limiting Tampa's time and space. They're giving them absolutely no room for them to be able to make plays, which is forcing them to play a lot quicker than they want to. I mean, the only thing I think that could potentially impact Colorado is injuries, right? We talk about the playoffs are always a game of attrition, right? How many guys you have left standing? I mean, look, I said it, Strome on that goal, the first goal by Stamkos, Strome basically backed off. He was right there and couldn't move because of the pelvic injury, right? So, and not that the shot shouldn't have been stopped, but that inability to be able to make plays with time and space and force you to play quicker, Colorado is well suited to playing that type of game, to be able to go up and down the ice, which is not necessarily Tampa's forte per se, but it's also hurting them because they're making moves really quickly and they're creating turnovers, which is then allowing Colorado to counterattack like crazy.
Well, in our group text, I was saying, it's like, I said the Rangers, at the way Tampa was playing in game 2, the Rangers would be more effective against Colorado because the Rangers are quicker than Tampa is. And, it may be the wear and tear of the playoffs, and guys like Kucherov and Stamkos are taking a beating over now the 4th round. But really, Colorado, Russ, I think their speed advantage is dramatic. And the thing that I pointed to in terms of Tampa having the advantage over Colorado was the goaltending. And really, Kemper's not been a factor because Tampa had 17 shots on goal in game 2. They hardly any chances.
Yeah, they'll get more shots this game. But even Darren Helm for the first half of the first period was a factor. Again, the 4 the 4 lines that Colorado puts out are better than any 4 lines in hockey. Cale Makar didn't score anything until the 3rd period, then got a shorthanded goal and a goal. And really, McKinnon hasn't scored much. So the fact that they're beating them like that makes it even tougher for Tampa, because all of a sudden, if Cale Makar is going to heat up, they've got bigger problems.
So there is this crazy thing about the high waffle side on Vasilevsky that I want to talk about a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is the statistical analysis of what is it, 83% of the goals?
Yes, if you look at the goals the Rangers scored in the first 2 games, pretty much all of them went to the high blocker side. But he didn't get beat high blocker. You look at the goal by Manch, you look at the goal by Makar, he got beat between the blocker and the body. Both shots, same exact situation, same spacing, same the other way, right? So both of them did not go high. They had medium blocker side on the same side of the ice.
It kind of messes you up, though, Kevin. I mean, Kevin is a goalie. That messes you up if you're getting beat.
Yeah, it does. But I mean, we hear this every year. Every year it's they're beating the goalies high. That's the big story and everything else. Yeah. So, I mean, it's been going on forever, but it is true. I mean, if you watch the games, they're all being. But that seems to happen every year, and we only talk about it during the playoffs. But it's a general rule. You got to go high against these goalies. They got everything blocked off.
He's like his split. I mean, Shesterkin has the bet. Shesterkin has the smallest 5-hole I've ever seen. These goals that have just 5-hole is crazy. Just low is gone.
It's great. It's great that we know his the chink in his armor. Now it's just a matter of actually being able to hit high blocker.
Right.
Little space this big between the crossbar and the goal.
These guys can. I mean, that's
they can.
There's a danger. You try and do that all game, you start missing the net, then all of a sudden it's
Vinajad on the one-timer a couple of times late, right? He shot it over the crossbar a couple of times.
Well, how many times are you watching a game with people who say, I just can't believe they missed the net from 12 feet? Well, they're trying to pick a corner that's about 2 inches long. But
they're pinpointing it down. And
well, Mike, you talked about Trouba, right? Rangers were up 2-0. Trouba doesn't take a really bad penalty and give them momentum. Look, not saying they would have won that series. That penalty and that power play goal by Kucherov literally changed the tone and tenor of that entire series, right? So I am not and also you look at Series 1, right? We didn't think they were dead against Toronto, but we all thought Toronto was in a pretty good driver's seat against them, given the way they had played.
Not me.
But up 3-2, you think they're in a decent shape. Granted, given history, didn't work out that way. There's only so many times you can go to the well, right? And you increase the level of talent you play against each round. Right. They're facing a team that's also on a mission, right? Because the last couple of years, if you view Colorado, they would be put in the prism and the caliber of a disappointing team because they hadn't won, right? And they're trying to erase that narrative now. If they sweep, all those narratives the last couple of years pretty much go out the window, especially if you sweep the team that's won back-to-back cups.
I mean, do we all remember Adrian Dater and Nathan McKinnon at the end of last year's playoffs? Remember that moment at the podium when Dater said something to him and McKinnon was just completely pissed off. I mean, this team, they have had that. You're right, Jan. I mean, they have these moments where it's just completely but I do think that part of me still feels that old adage of it's not a series until you lose at home counts in this one. I think that momentum with Tampa is a magical thing at times, and if they get it,
I'm not stupid enough to say Tampa is done, because this team has defied logic a couple times in this playoffs and in other I didn't think they were going to sweep Florida. I thought the Rangers had a pretty good chance to beat them. They've fought through injuries. They've lost guys like Braden Point. Now Point might be a game time decision tonight because he didn't strike me as being really effective in the first 2 games. Obviously, he's playing on one leg. I mean, I give him all the credit in the world to playing that, but I'm not going to count this team out. But if they go down 3-0 and they look bad doing it, if it's sort of like Game 3 Edmonton, Colorado, then the writing might be on the wall.
Yeah,
I think the best comment was Friedman said on radio when I heard this podcast. He goes, Tampa could be down 3-0 and down 10-0 in Game 4 in the third period, and I still think they have a shot at coming back, right? Because that's just the makeup of this team, right? They're one of those teams that you can never rule them out. And look, you have to slay the beast. I think, if they win today, I think we all pretty much, the only question will be is how many games is
Right.
Colorado going to win the series in. But if they win today and you get momentum back, and again, it's never a series until you lose on your own home ice, then it's a whole different story going into game 4 if they can pull out a victory tonight.
I wanted to bring up this point just because it's off of the series, but it's connected to the series. For any of the Flyers fans who want to know how Tortorella plays, watch the Colorado Avalanche defensively.
Right.
Because people put a lot of emphasis on Tortorella's shot blocking, and there is a lot of emphasis on shot blocking. But what he's really about, I think it was Mike talked about, taking away time and space. He wants you on that person the minute they get the puck.
Yeah.
And he accepts nothing less. So that's why these teams they're so hard to play against, because they never give you any time. That's what the Columbus Blue Jackets were like when they swept the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's the way his Tampa Bay teams were. That was certainly like what the Rangers were like. They were about shot blocking as well, but they just didn't give you any time, and they were always on you. And I thought yesterday I was watching that, and because I had just done a Tortorella column, I thought, this is what playing against the Tortorella team is like.
Your column. That's a perfect transition to what I want to talk about next, Mike. Kevin, is the fact that I'm losing my mind. Sorry. The fact that article you wrote did get a lot of buzz going around the website there. That Tortorella was like made for the Flyers, and I think it's an interesting one. Go ahead and make your point.
I just think that in Philadelphia's long tradition as a team, they want to be hard, they want to be edgy, they want to be on you, and that's the way Tortorella wants to play. And I really liked his speech about what he said is he wants this team something that and he meant the fan base can be proud of,
right?
Because that's the way he plays,
right?
He wants to get goals. He's like any other coach. But really, what he wants to do is for people to look and say, "Look how competitive that team is." And a lot of people talk about accountability, but that's the difference between Tortorella and other coaches. And I thought that speech he gave about when it occurs, when it's time to address it on Tuesday, I don't say to myself, well, I'll get to it on Wednesday. Because he said it's important because there'll always be something else on Wednesday. And I just think the fans are going to love Tortorella. I just think that, his demanding of accountability is something that the Flyer fan base is really, really going to enjoy.
Yeah, I thought that.
I just wonder with the roster construction, though. You look at a guy like Erasmus Ristolainen. I'm not quite sure if that style suits his skills necessarily. Right, that's my concern. You look like a Couturier. He's a
why would you even
Couturier type of coach
with that? Because he'll just be gone.
But they got signed for several more years.
I understand that, but when you bring in a coach like that, you're going to eventually have to. Finagle your roster to suit what he does. But I will tell you that if Rasmus Ristolainen doesn't play his style, he won't play.
Right. And as somebody who saw Ristolainen play years and years in Buffalo, I think he'll be a good fit with Tortorella.
Yeah, he actually will be.
He's physical. He's I think an above average skater for his size.
He's not what you expect him to be at all.
Right. I think he'll be a fit.
He's not like when you think of him like
I see Provorov as being a better fit than Ristolainen does personally, but that's just me.
Ristolainen is actually a tough guy. Like that is his thing. And
look, Brandon Dubinsky gave his great tweet with the praying hands when it came to them when Tortorella went there. So he knows that style very well.
Yeah, and Dubinsky didn't do well with it.
So. Right, and he didn't like. I mean, I say this a couple things about I was legendary, not legendary. You guys made a lot more of it than it was. That I didn't want Tortorella necessarily as the Flyers coach, but because I really thought Tocchet was the best choice. But I will say this: listening to his press conference, Kevin, I was very struck by that this guy does feel like a Flyer, and also he definitely has honed his ability to talk to the media over the years and really came off exactly as he should. And, I think a lot of this, maybe the little bit of time he spent in television behind, there's certain things that are just, he's smoother than he was. He won't be, he's not going to be smooth when they're losing, but in this situation now, he was very, very calm, very like, this is what we're gonna do.
Well,
I mean, for him to sit there and say, you know, when I let me finish. When I was you know, when I coached other teams, I always looked at that Flyers jersey and said, that's a team that I want to like. That's a team that is that kind of stuff does resonate really well in Philadelphia. No question about it.
And we had Sam Carchidi on the Off the Post show on Sunday, and he said the same thing that you just said, but he also said, well, Elaine Vigneault sounded really good when he got hired too. I mean, different types of personalities, I'll grant you, but what I'm saying is they were both veteran coaches, they were both qualified, but and maybe Tortorella fits the Philly fan base better.
There's a lot more guys like Tortorella sitting in line for cheesesteaks right now at Pat's than there are Elaine Vigneaults. The reality is that, like, I mean, that is the reality, right? Like, against Vigneault, but there is, like, Tortorella looks like he could be standing in line, you know, for a cheesesteak down at, 3rd and Chestnut. He's absolutely in the realm of,
Yeah, and the Tortorella's post-game press conferences, they tend to get exaggerated. Like, there's been enough of them that, yes, he can be bombastic. But more often than not, you go in and, it's just run of the mill. Usually it's calculated when he explodes. And sometimes he just wants to make a point with a reporter that he's irritated with. But more often than not, he's a very intelligent man, and they can be interesting. He comes in, he says what he wants to say, and Scotty Bowman used to, no matter what you ask him, he answered the question he wanted to answer. So even if you didn't ask him about the power play, and you ask him about something else, he'd say, "Well, also the power play tonight was blah, blah, blah," And I think Tortorella has an idea of what he wants to say, and regardless of the questions you ask, he says it.
Well, what's funny about that is, in my previous life as a musician, I was with Mercury Records, and Mercury Records, before we went out on our first tour, we went to this person who basically taught us how to give interviews, like how to be interviewed, which I think helped a lot in my later career when I was actually interviewing people. But in that lesson of how to be interviewed, it was, come to the interview with 3 things you're absolutely going to talk about no matter what you're asked. And how are you? And the skill was to take whatever question they asked you and make it sound like it was the question that you wanted asked, and get your answers out that you want to talk about regardless. And, as a reporter, I always feel like, you always want to leave the questions vague enough that the person who you're talking to can steer it in their own direction, because we're just trying to get them to start to talk, right? That's all we're trying to do with our questions right off.
Yeah, although sometimes you need a certain answer and you have to try to prod a little bit. True. But I agree with you. I always have told people when they've asked me, what's the secret to being interviewed? And I say to remember that you're in control of an interview.
Yeah.
I don't control an interview when I do it.
Yeah.
You do, right. Because I can only take the answers you give me.
Right.
If you don't want to talk to me about a certain subject, you just simply, just shouldn't do it.
Right. And Tortorella was great. Tortorella had his kind of prepared stuff he was going to say that was very, soothing to a Flyer fan base that hasn't had anybody like that for a long time. And when he went out there, watching it, I'm like, okay, this is good. This is good. I can see where this can play out. I do think that it's going to be interesting to see how certain players work, but I think that we're going to be surprised. One thing that we've noticed, right?
Yeah, not everybody will work, but there'll be surprises. I mean, there'll be some players that you won't think will work that will work, and there'll be some that you think should be a perfect fit and they won't. And they're sitting out. And you actually, it's more what happens within the game. You really got to pay attention with John Tortorella, the way he runs his bench, because if you're not staring at the minutes after every game, you may miss out at the fact that a guy that normally plays 19 is suddenly playing 14.
Right.
And,
right.
So you got to pay attention with John.
You really do. So I am going to get to my Calgary thing in just a second, Randy. I'm not meaning to string you along, but the one thing I want to bring up that we have to talk about along these lines is, and it's only brief, and it's probably more interesting to us, but it's worth mentioning the retiring of Zach Hill in Philadelphia, who is leaving the Flyers after 30 years as the media relations guy. But more than that, he is definitely a guy who's been more than that to this city. On July 1st, he's gone. One of the sweetest guys on the planet, one of the nicest people ever. Definitely one of the easiest people to work with. A huge part, has been there and, has seen how the sausage has been made from the Ed Snyder era on. Kevin, you should write his book. I'm convinced of that. I already texted him that. I'm like, you got to contact Kevin Allen to write a book.
Yeah. Well, Zach Hill is one of the best of the best. And, again, I just had described Philadelphia as kind of an edgy town. And, they were an edgy team. And yet somehow Zach Hill was always a favorite of all reporters around the country.
Yeah, and the thing that Zach did really well, and out to other people who deal with media, is he knew us. He knew everybody on their own little personal level. Like when he found out I was covering the Flyers, and stuff like that, he went and found out about my band, bought a couple CDs, listened to it. Next time I saw him, he's like, "Hey, I really like that one song on your second CD." Like, who would do that? It's just me. That was an astonishing thing. Immediately feeling like I was, welcomed in that room to talk to him. And then I was comping him tickets to a couple of my concerts, and he was there. He'd show up with friends to a concert. And this is just, this is a guy who went through the craziness of the Eric Lindros era as a media relations coordinator, which had to be unbelievably interesting. And there have to be stories about that in there. The Ed Snyder transition out of Ed Snyder, what it was like with Ed Snyder. Great. And he's the kind of guy who probably will never tell those stories. But if he does, I want you to write that book.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to do that. The word I would use to describe him too would be unflappable. Because regardless of what you called him about, he just tried to do his job. And if it didn't work out, he was apologetic. I gave it my best. I, tried to get him to talk to you, but he, I remember as president of the Writers Association, we had an issue. I think it was Richards wouldn't talk to Sam, right? Was it Richards and Sam?
Like Richards.
I forget now but anyway, I went in to talk to him about it, and we got Richards, and three of us had around. It was such a real reasonable conversation. It didn't work out for the writer because the guy Richards explained himself and said, "Look, I'm just not going to answer questions to him." And he goes, that was at a time when the writers, we thought we were clever, and someone would just repeat the question when Sam said it, and he wouldn't answer it, so someone else would say it, and he would, and Richards just wanted to make his protest. But anyway, the story that I want to tell is that Zach did the best he could to try to facilitate that and work that out, but it didn't work out. But we all knew that Zach did the best he could.
You knew that, and 100%. Right. He was instant with returning messages, instant with returning texts, and always willing to talk to you about questions. Like, because I was one of the first internet bloggers, so to speak, covering the team. If somebody else if there was another blogger out there that was looking to get credentialed or whatever, he would have me check him out sometimes. Or he would say, "What do you think? Is this guy legit?" Or when someone said something once on Twitter about Jeff Carter that was really salacious, he said, "What should our response be?" And I was like, "Just ignore it and ignore trolls." We were like, this is the early internet type stuff where teams are negotiating the internet and how to do it. And he was never, just an amazing guy. I'd like to try to get him on the show. I talked to him about it over the weekend. So I think, I think
he really knew how to manage up too, which is really an art. Like he had to deal with corporates, and before that, the Snyders and
Ed Snyder and Comcast are two monstrous entities.
Right.
They were just monstrous. Ed trusted Zach with everything. Zach, Ed wouldn't let Zach retire. There was no way he would be throwing $1 million a year at him right now if he was still around to keep him. He was so comfortable with him, it was crazy. And he's definitely there. If everybody was like Zach, would be all right. But let's move on now to news. Mike, you want to say something?
A couple things. One, the talk of Peter DeBoer, it sounds like it's a guarantee now that he's going to be the head coach in Dallas. I think Pierre LeBrun reported a 4-year deal for $4 million a year.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
So Cassidy got over $4 million.
Yep.
He's got and now DeBoer got over $4 million. The interesting.
What's Torts getting?
What's that?
What's Torts getting?
Torts is getting over $4 million.
Yeah.
So they're all seeming to hit that mark. Now the interesting thing here is that there still has not been any confirmation out of Florida regarding Brunette, and there's starting to be some whispers out there that maybe they're going to go in some other direction. It doesn't seem like Trotz is part of that act. It seems that I don't know who the candidates would be, but Trotz seems to be either Winnipeg or Detroit. He's apparently traveling to Winnipeg this week to meet with the ownership and management again. So they may have the inside track. But Kev, is there anything about?
No, he's. I'm hearing he's definitely not Detroit.
Okay.
Right.
So I mean, we'll see. I think they're looking more at a bridge coach in Detroit. Somebody they're not looking to give someone a 5-year deal. They want to see what this team is like in 3 years. So I think they'll be looking at one of the assistant coaches, maybe in Tampa, maybe elsewhere.
Right.
Again, the other guy would, could they talk Rick Bowness, who Yzerman knows really well, into coming for a couple of years to get it going. I think that's a possibility as well. Any of those, but I don't see them getting one of the big names. I don't think it'll be Tocchet either.
No.
Seen some rumors
I've
about
also heard
Quinn in
Trotz
Boston.
in Florida, by the way. And I think the Trotz in Florida is still a very good possibility. They have been very quiet. It was revealed by Freeman that they've interviewed. That they do have interest in Trotz and Paul Maurice, which I had talked about before with you guys with them. But that still hasn't been determined. But that's another. I mean, if you're Barry Trotz, Florida is obviously an incredibly enticing place to go.
Yeah, and Jan just mentioned Boston seems to be sort of flying under the radar in terms of their selections. It's supposedly Jay Leach, Jim Montgomery, David Quinn, and you'd mentioned Spencer Carberry, the Leafs assistant coach.
Yeah.
Apparently they were interested in bringing him in as an assistant last year when he was already talking to the Leafs. He seems to be a dark horse. The other ones seem to be more leading candidates, but it's still pretty good names.
No, really good names. All right, so let's get to some Calgary news. I was on the phone today with a Calgary person as I was stuck in traffic driving back here when my air conditioner decided to die, which is always a fun moment. And I'm sitting there sweating my tail off talking to this guy who told me, well, guess what here? Didn't expect this, but there has been some progress between the Flames and Johnny Gaudreau. Now, he said, I don't know that it's going to get done. He said, and I can't promise you it's going to, he says, but I can he kind of said, this is what I can promise you about this. This will be the decider. This will be the deciding moment. So they have, as if almost this is the last foray or the last attempt. But he says, I'm surprised how much progress there is. And I'm a little bit surprised too by Gaudreau's willingness to return. He said, it sounds like he might take maybe, I don't know, like $500,000 less there than he would take someplace else. He does like his line. Oh, how could he not? I mean,
it's more the devil you know than the devil you don't. That's probably
How could you not like who you're? I mean, Gaudreau's built for success there right now. I mean, the last season was amazing. The line mates are incredible.
Right, but that one of the line mates may be gone after next year. That's one of the problems.
Right, but there does seem to be some serious headway being made here, and I don't think this would surprise you, Kevin, because you seem to be the one who seemed to think that this was possible. Am I right about that?
Well, and also Kevin Weeks also I think sort of said this 2 days ago that he thought it was trending toward that direction as well. But I thought out of the two, Forsberg or him, I actually thought Gaudreau had a better shot at leaving. I thought Forsberg would stay. For sure, but now I don't know. I thought it was interesting this week in Nashville. Willie Donick interviewed John Hines, who said, "I'm optimistic that Forsberg is going to stay, but I'm preparing as if he might not." So,
that's the perfect answer, non-answer to a question.
Yeah, but would you even say that if you were confident that he was coming?
Right.
So. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's so important that they get. I mean, who are they if they don't have John Gaudreau? Yes,
I know.
Who have Flames? And I think as you guys there pointed out, if Gaudreau doesn't stay, Kachuk's not going to stay.
No, and they could be. There are three sort of linchpin forwards. The last few years have been Monahan, Gaudreau, and Tkachuk. And Monahan's hurt right now, and he's, I don't know what his status is going to be for next year. He could be traded. He could be bought out, or he can't be bought out. Right, he can't be bought out because he's injured. But my point is that all three of them could be off the Flames' radar by this time. Two of them, or one of them definitely in Goudreau, he could walk free agency, and by next year, Tkachuk and Monahan could be gone. That franchise, I mean, that's a complete seed change if they lose all three of them.
Yeah, but don't you think they're actually rooting for Monahan?
They put it this way. I think if you end up missing the entire year and they put him on long-term IR, I don't think they'd be that upset because his game the last 2 years has plummeted. Now, part of it could be injury related, but him ending up on LTIR just frees up $6 million you could play with, quote unquote, and bring back Gaudreau and especially Tkachuk, who would be gone maybe after a year or two. And they have no choice because if you look, they have some depth offensively, but look, you're losing 3 elite guys. If two of them leave, you basically have really no first line and no part of a second line if you tried to split up those 3 guys.
And in spite of the fact that they like the way he plays and he fits sort of the motif of what Daryl Sutter wants to play, if they bought out Milan Lucic, they would open up about $4.5 million in cap space, and that's cap space they might need for Goudreau and for Tkachuk. So, I mean,
I kind of feel like Lucic is obsolete too. Like, I just feel like,
but Sutter liked the way he played.
Of course you like him, but really, isn't that what Tkachuk's for? You know what I mean? Isn't that what Tkachuk just does it better?
Different, completely different styles. Clearly, I mean, look, just given the nature, one's a scorer and one is. I wouldn't call him a goon necessarily, but I'll use the term agitator nicely in the nicest way possible.
If Brad Treliving could arrange a Brooks Orpik type of deal where he buys him out or he trades him to some other team, they buy him out and he re-signs Lucic, they would sign up for that because they like Lucic and Lucic likes to play there. But it's the $5.25 or $5.5 million cap hit that's a killer, especially when 2 of your best forwards are on the precipice of leaving within a year. One now and one in a year from now.
Two things I want to bring up before we head out. Number one was I was looking at the cap-friendly outlook of the Colorado Avalanche, and I really thought it was fascinating that we're so used now to see teams that are just pressed up against the cap, and they have to get rid of people to keep people. But if you look at the way Joe Sakic has done it, he's got tons of money, but he's got 1 billion people to sign, and so he's got essentially the same decisions that everybody does. But he won't be, jettisoning people to keep people. He'll just have to pick who he wants to sign. So, and he's got to set aside $10 million for Nathan McKinnon, and then he's got to make some. But there's some tough decisions. I'm going to be writing about this for Hockey Buzz. But like Nikushkin, like how much do you pay him now? Like nobody's paid attention to this, but he's leading the Avalanche in even strength goals. Yeah, it's not McKinnon. It's Nikushkin, and he's played very, very well for him. And I've heard that they're really going to make a concentrated effort to try to get him. And because Jan's here, I think this is appropriate. The Petrie negotiations, which have become more elaborate than I thought they were going to be. I thought, 34 years old, 6.25, but all of a sudden now there seems to be several teams that are interested. And I saw that Hockey Now is reporting that the Rangers have joined in, which
makes absolutely zero sense at all.
None. Well, then we won't talk about it then.
No. I'm saying Miller.
That's why I wanted to bring it up because it didn't make any sense.
It makes no sense. You have Miller. You have Trouba.
I don't want to talk about things that don't make any sense.
You have Miller, Trouba. You have Miller, Trouba, Fox, Lindgren as your top 4 already, right?
I'll give you one scenario, Jan, because I just realized this. I'm looking at the Rangers on cap friendly, because Russ has been saying, they're going to buy out Patrick Nemeth. They can't buy out Patrick Nemeth because they have 3 buyouts already on the books.
I think they free up. I think they can after this year. They can buy out one more.
Shattenkirk, Girardi, and there's one. I
thought Girardi cleared up. I have to take a look, but I think there is room to buy him out.
But if they can't buy him out, then maybe they flip him to Montreal and they save a couple million on the cap.
The problem is I think they only have about 11 million or so left right now. You have to worry about whether or not Kakko is going to get offer sheeted, and there's been enough rumors and guys on my blog have written enough about doing a 1-for-1 of him for Kirby Dach, which I don't know if it makes sense necessary for either party, right? But if the Rangers right now have the 4 of Fox, Trouba, you have Lindgren, and you have Miller, right? You
and
have
Miller,
those.
Miller needs a new contract after this year.
Well, right, exactly, right, and that's one guy, right? You have Schneider as your fifth. You still have Zach Jones you have Zach Jones who could come up. You have Matthew Robertson who could come up. You have a pipeline of other guys. They're not spending a ton of money on a sixth defenseman right now. When you have to worry about your forwards and Kevin, what you said about Nichushkin, I think it's Nichushkin stays and Mr. Kadri basically finds a big pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But Nichushkin, I think his asking price may have doubled this playoffs based upon what we've seen so far.
Yeah. Well, I didn't, just so you know, I didn't mention the Rangers in mine because it made no sense. So I just wanted to ask you whether I missed the boat on that. So I didn't need a whatever explanation. Just wanted to know. It makes sense to me.
I think the goal is to give Miller a lot more power play time next year. Right. And they only use one guy at the point normally, except on the second player they use two. But they don't have the cap space right now after so many extensions, unless somebody eats an enormous amount of room and you move a guy to get rid of him, maybe then. But Petry's game has really fallen off a lot also the last year.
Not exactly. He was terrible to start of the year, and then suddenly when Marty St. Louis came back, and I noticed fans have been talking about saying goodbye to him, and all of them lauding him and they're a pretty, knowledgeable fan base about how he only had 3 bad months and all the time he's been in Montreal. That's a pretty ringing endorsement from Montreal fans. So.
The chatter about Petry has been Dallas because Dallas thinks they're going to lose Klingberg, and he would be what they would be prepared to pay Klingberg. But Klingberg's probably going to go someplace and make $8 million or something like that as a free agent. But I looked at Colorado, Kev, and I said, okay, Manson, he's gone. He's probably going back. The rumors he might be going back to Anaheim or even Edmonton, where his dad is an assistant coach. Kadri is gone. He's going to make $8 million, something like that. Burakovsky might be gone because Nichushkin, he's probably going to make $4.5 to $5 million. And this guy has been a bargain the last couple of years, but they just can't afford to bring all these guys back.
Okay, I want to get to a couple quick things we have really fast before we go out of here. First, all right. Barry Trotz, it was put into the chat room, and the rumor is out there that he just bought a house in Nashville. All right, so we hear these things all the time. Why would Barry Trotz
had a house already in Nashville?
No, he never got rid of it. I actually know the answer to this.
Go ahead, thank you.
Yes, his daughter has a business there.
Yes, yeah,
it is connected to her business.
Okay, cool.
That's what he bought.
Their daughter actually,
but there has been chatter about him being potentially in management, going into management in Nashville. Because he doesn't want to get into some sort of management position, and that there's been that tie. But I mean, how much say would he have with David Poile still there, unless David Poile is planning on retiring in the next year or so? I mean, we heard about the ownership situation in Nashville. I would think that if he was going there in some sort of management capacity, it would be tied to the new owners. But who knows?
Yeah. I mean, could you see him back? I mean, he and Poile obviously are still close.
Yeah, but the question I guess would come down to if you were bringing him in to be the heir apparent to Poile, like Barry's 60 now too, so well, so I don't know, is he the right guy to be the heir apparent?
And he has no management experience, so you're talking about a neophyte GM if you're bringing him to be a GM. So
absolutely. All right, then finally, a couple things real quick. The Kadri, we were talking about Kadri. I've heard, I don't usually talk too much about guys while they're still playing, but his name is definitely coming up with the Bruins as a possibility a lot. That continues to come up. I don't know how why they make that work or fit, but Kadri and the Bruins I could see that making sense to a degree.
Well, you would probably be contingent on Bergeron not coming back.
Right.
Or how much Bergeron's going to make, right? Because you're not going to give him the same kind of salary either, right? And when they lost Krejci last year, that took away their second line center. So they've been searching for whatever.
Finally, I want to talk about Alex DeBrincat, who his name has been put out there by people who are very reputable. And I heard this about 2 weeks ago, and I just couldn't see it. He's young. He just scored 41 goals. He seems like if you're rebuilding or retooling or whatever you're doing, if you have a hockey team, you'd want to keep him at this point. There's no point in not keeping him around for this. Kevin, what are your thoughts on why is his
Well, I shared your skepticism about it, but when I've talked to people about it, they said, this is a case of like the Chikrin deal where, they're listening to offers on him, but they want a lot. They want a exceptional young player like, your best young player, essentially a first round pick, and another guy that's going to play on their roster. So, that's a pretty big ask for a guy who scores a lot of goals, but he's 5'0". So.
And what might also be at work here, Ack, is he's another year on his contract at $6.4 million. Then he's an arbitration eligible RFA. If they're trying to trade him, they probably know that there's no way after the 1 year of arbitration he's going to re-sign there, even though they have tons of money. So maybe they're thinking, we need, hey, he could be the guy that New Jersey trades the second overall pick for.
That's something I heard was possible.
Yeah, well, I don't think that'd get it done. So
probably not, because they'd want an extension as well as. They want to sign him to an extension so they have him locked up.
New Jersey's got to figure out an extension for Jesper Bratt also right now, which is a primary focus for them also.
Yeah,
they might trade him, Jan.
No, they won't trade him from everything I've heard.
I wanted to ask Kevin something. So something you guys mentioned, right? With I'll use the term recycling of all the old coaches. Are you a little surprised at all that no teams have gone for new blood at all? I mean, we've seen the same kind of swirl over and over again, right? I mean, we had a couple of years ago with Montgomery and Quinn, right? Neither one of, look, I still think Quinn did a fairly decent job in New York. I'm probably one of those in the minority there, but I do think a lot of the uplift of what happened to the young guys came while he was he had to learn how to be a coach in the NHL. And Montgomery obviously had, unfortunately, the drinking issues, but I'm a bit surprised they've gone with the same regurgitation of the same names, just putting the same names just in different places all the time.
Yeah. Travis,
I am surprised, but then I thought about. I was surprised, but then I thought about it, and if you look at all those teams, with the exception of the Flyers, Dallas, Vegas, those are teams that still believe they're close to winning and would want a veteran guy.
Right.
And Philadelphia, I don't know whether they've really accepted that, how bad they really are.
They never do.
So, they think that Tortorella is going to suddenly make them competitive again, but it'll take time, for him to do that. But I really thought that we'd see. I think it hurt that Tampa has gone so far because they have 3 assistant coaches that everybody would like to talk to.
I like them.
I think if they were out there, who knows what they could have done. So
one last thing, Eck. The Vancouver Canucks were the winners of the Andrei Kuzmenko sweepstakes. He's the latest KHL free agent, unrestricted free agent star to come over. He had a big year with Scott St. Petersburg. He's only, I think, 26 years old. There were a number of teams going after him. Edmonton and Vancouver were 2 of them, and he went with Vancouver. And it's a free roll of the dice. You don't know what the guy is going to be. He could be Panarin. He could be, Igor Ozaganov. So, we'll see, how he does. But
and there it is, folks. Your weekly reference to.
Let's leave on that note. I love that, by the way.
So if you're Igor Ozaganov out there, please reply in the comments to Mike on that comment. All right, all the time we have for today, folks. Enjoy Game 3 tonight. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about where this thing's going from there. And also, we are really honing in on a lot of free agents and things are really happening. So watch the rumor chart constantly. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow.